Let us now examine the poem The Garden in detail, stanza-wise, line-wise. Stanza 1, lines 1 to 4. How vainly men themselves amaze to win the palm the oak obeys, and their incessant labours see, crowned from some single herb or tree. The speaker starts off in a kind of scoffing, mocking tone. Look at all those silly men. Look at all those silly men working, trying to win some trees. How ridiculous are they? But these aren't just any trees. The palm tree, the oak and the bay, or laurel tree all have special significance in classical traditions. A crown made out of the branches of each tree is given out to people who deserve honor in a specific field. The palm tree for military honors, the oak tree for political honors, and the laurel tree for poetic honors. These awards mean someone important like the king, emperor, governor, despot, whomsoever has noticed your work for being awesome. And that kind of recognition also opens up the door for making more money or getting yourself a better job. Translation: there are, in other words, lots of reasons to want those tree crowns and lots of people willing to work very, very hard to get them. Our speaker doesn't seem to be one of those people though. He doesn't praise the work ethic of these men. He mocks them for working so hard for something so insignificant. We don't know exactly what our speaker has got against all these men who are striving for glory. But the use of words like vainly means in vain, incessant means never ending, and labors means hard work indicates a negative impression. Take a look at line 4. The phrase crowned from some single herb or tree isn't meant to sound impressive. Crowns are generally very elaborate and are obviously associated with royalty and power. But the crowns here are made out of some single herb or tree. The speaker can't even be bothered to figure out what kind of herb or tree it is. It is just some herb, and a single herb at that. It seems like our speaker thinks that sounds pretty lame. Lame means weak. Here it means weak. Lines 5 to 8. Whose short and narrow verge shade does prudently their toils upbraid, while all flowers and all trees do close to weave the garlands of repose. The speaker continues his scoffing in lines 5 and 6, but the wording is a bit tricky, so we will help spell it out. Line 5 opens and we are still talking about tree crowns. In case you were wondering, our speaker's opinion of them hasn't improved. These crowns are so worthless, they can't even offer shade. Instead of being an honor, the crowns are, in a sense, a badge of disapproval. The short and narrow verge shade of the wreaths upbraids or censures, or questions, in other words, the toils and labors of the men striving to earn them. The wreaths from lines 1 to 4, it seems, are being compared to all flowers and all trees. The criticism of their short and narrow verge shade makes sense when you think about the shade you would get from wearing a crown or wreath compared to the shade of a whole canopy of trees, vines and flowers. It seems that while all these men are busy with their incessant labors, the speaker is kicking it out in nature, meaning he is enjoying himself in nature. The flowers and trees out in the natural world are weaving themselves together to create a beautiful, stress free, super shady environment for the speaker to relax in. This stanza as a whole is making point about workaholics, meaning people who are busy working all the time. They don't take any rest, they don't relax. Such people are known as workaholics. The speaker is wondering why men spend so much time working in their stuffy offices to earn one measly crown of oak branches that can't even keep them out of the sun, when all those men could and should be spending time with the hundreds of different kinds of trees that exist in the garden. The speaker to the answer to the speaker's question, of course, is that the crowns are not just tree branches woven together. They symbolize something: glory, honor, talent, and recognition. But the speaker already knows that, and he is twisting the tradition in order to prove a point. The natural world has better things to offer than the man made world. Our speaker does not really think that men who work tirelessly to write the best poem ever want the crown of laurel because they want to use its branches for shade. He is taking a tradition that uses something from nature to celebrate a public accomplishment and saying things should be the other way round. We, the public, should be celebrating nature instead. This kind of tradition twisting and wordplay is a form of wit, and wit is something Andrew Marvell's poetry is known for. There will be other situations in the garden where familiar stories, traditions, or ideas are interpreted in unfamiliar ways. Here at the beginning of the poem is also the perfect time to take notice of the rhyme, form, and meter. As you might have noticed, this poem is broken up into 9 stanzas, each of which is an octave, a fancy name for a stanza with 8 lines. It is also good to note that the poem is written in rhymed couplets of iambic tetrameters. Stanza 2, lines 9 to 12. Fair quiet have I found thee here, and innocence thy sister dear. Mistaken long I sought you then, in busy companies of men. In stanza 2, we learn that our speaker has found fair quiet and innocence here. Where exactly here is, we don't know yet, but we know where it is not. Lines 11 and 12 tell us that the speaker, once upon a time, looked for fair quiet and innocence in society, but came back empty handed. Lines 9 and 10 use a literary device known as personification, or the act of referring to a non living object. It can be an idea, place, thing, or quality, as if it had personal attributes. Marvell refers to fair quiet as having a sister, innocence, and therefore personifies the two ideas. You might be tempted to label the speaker's address to fair quiet in line 9 as an apostrophe. But is it really? It looks a lot like one. But in order for it to be a true apostrophe, it has to be an address to someone or something who is not there. Fair quiet is referred to as being here. Of course, whether or not you consider it an apostrophe depends on where you think here is. Let us keep reading to see if we get any more clues. Lines 13 to 16. Your sacred plants, if here below, only among the plants will grow. Society is all but rude to this delicious solitude. The "you're" at the beginning of line 13 refers all the way back up to "fair quiet" in line 9. So now the speaker, it seems, is talking about fair quiet owning plants. Plants which we learn in line 14 only grow among other plants. At first glance, line 14 seems like a weird and totally obvious statement to make. Why should fair quiet's plants not be found with plants belonging to anyone else? In order to really understand line 13 and 14, we have to dip into a little 17th century philosophy. These lines are actually referring to the idea that all plants on earth are inferior versions of the plants that grow above or in heaven. Heaven yani ki swarg. The sunflowers you see out of your window, for example, are all well and good, but they are not anywhere close to being as beautiful as the sunflowers that grow in the afterlife. यानी कि मौत के बाद जो स्वर्ग में आपको खूबसूरती मिलेगी वो धरती पर वैसी खूबसूरती बिल्कुल भी नहीं है. Marvell is talking up nature. He is saying that if the sacred versions of plant exist anywhere on earth, they would be found hanging out with the other plants. Nature, even if it is inferior, earthly form, is a more suitable place for sacred plants than anything human society could come up with. Lines 15 and 16 sum things up. Society cannot compare to being alone in the great outdoors. The mention of solitude in line 16 catches our attention. The speaker isn't just trying to escape the hustle and bustle of city life, यानी कि शहर की जो दौड़ धूप की जो ज़िंदगी है वो इंग्लिश में हसल एंड बसल कहलाती है. He is saying, I want some me time out here in the country, and don't anyone even think of trying to get tag along. Me time यानी कि अकेले में जो वक्त इंसान बताता है. It seems that the only way to stay truly removed from society is to have no company at all. Stanza 3, lines 17-18. No white nor red was ever seen, so amorous as this lovely green. In these lines, the speaker is comparing colors, and his conclusion is a surprising one. Apparently, green, not red or white, is the most romantic color. But what does it mean for a color to be amorous? The dictionary definition of amorous is showing, feeling, or related to sexual desire. But green isn't usually a color we associate with love. In fact, red and white are much more traditional. Now, whenever colors appear in poetry, you can usually bet, means be sure, that some fairly significant symbolism is going to come along with them. Traditionally speaking, white represents innocence, red symbolizes lust and romance, and green is the color of fertility. So, what do you think? Does the association of green with fertility make it an amorous color? Or is Marvell pulling another witty trick and getting at something else entirely? Lines 19-24. Fond lovers, cruel as their flame, cut in these trees their mistress's name. Little alas they know or heed, how far these beauties hers exceed. Fair trees, wheresoever your barks I wound, no name shall but your own be found. In case you missed his point about trees being better than people back in stanza 2, Marvell illustrates it here with a nice bit of imagery. Ever heard your parents refer to old flames from back in their high school days? This goes back to a really common simile that compares the heat of a romantic relationship to the heat of a burning flame. Marvell, though, turns this comparison around. The heat of the flame becomes a cruel thing, and instead of comparing romantic heat favorably to the heat of fire, Marvell draws on fire's capacity to destroy and burn things up. So when Marvell writes that lovers are cruel as their flame, he is saying the lovers are destroying things in the same way that fire does. As we will see in the next line, he is referring immediately to trees, but many people also interpret this line as a critique of romantic relationships in general. They read it as saying something more like this: lovers who are as cruel to the outside world as they are to each other. These lovers are engaging in the old fashioned practice of carving each other's names into a tree bark. But why is Marvell describing this as cruel? It seems harmless enough, right? In line 21, there is something these lovers don't know about what they are doing. Either that or they know and choose to ignore it. According to Marvell, the cruelty is a result of a lack of appreciation. The lovers are too busy wooing their women to notice that their totally cliched romantic gestures are destroying something that is far more beautiful than their lady loves. Being attracted to women, apparently, is for ignoramuses. Trees are the new ladies. Ignoramus means a person who does not know much, an ignorant or stupid person. यानी कि कोई अनजान व्यक्ति जिसको कुछ भी नहीं आता है या कोई मूर्ख व्यक्ति. As you might have expected, our speaker is not going to fall into the same trap. Fair trees, he apostrophizes, means he's talking to the trees, in other words. If anyone ever catches me carving anything into your bark, they are only doing a big heart with I love oaks written on it. Stanza 4, lines 25 to 26. When we have run our passion's heat, love hither makes his best retreat. We have moved into the next stanza, but we are still talking about romantic love in line 25. The line essentially reads, when we have exhausted our sexual desire, but there is a pun going on with the word heat. Marvell is immediately referring to heat as in romantic heat, but it also refers to the heat as the heats of a race. The pun on heat introduces us to the predominant metaphor in this stanza, which compares the pursuit of sexual passion to the running of a race. After our sexual desires are exhausted, love retreats to hither. Hither means here. Now, hither is an old-timey word that probably even your grandparents are too young to have used. It basically means towards this place, meaning the garden. But what is Marvell really saying? That after we are sick of loving people, we start loving plants? How does love, a feeling, retreat anyway? Notice that Marvell personifies love in line 26 by referring to his retreat. Love is no longer a feeling but a person. The retreat then is a person's retreat. This raises lots of questions concerning the speaker's opinion of the worth of romance and of society in general. Lines 27 to 32. The gods that mortal beauty chase, still in a tree did end their race. Apollo hunted Daphne so, only that she might laurel grow. And Pan did after Syrinx speed, not as a nymph, but for a reed. Just in case you don't believe that all love stories end with men ditching their women for trees, Marvell has some good old fashioned mythology to back up his point. The gods, he says, known connoisseurs of mortal beauty, really weren't into the ladies. They only wanted women for the plants they would become. This isn't as totally crazy as it sounds. People are occasionally turned into plants according to Greek mythology, but it does not go down quite how Marvel tells the story either. Marvel uses the stories of Apollo and Daphne and Pan and Syrinx as examples, which you can read in more detail here and here. In super abbreviated form, both stories involve men, Apollo and Pan, who fall madly in love with ladies or nymphs, Daphne and Syrinx, but the ladies want nothing to do with them or any other man. The men chase the women all over the woods and are about to catch them when river gods decide to swoop in and save the day by turning the ladies into plants. Daphne becomes a laurel tree and Syrinx becomes a reed. Hence, the race of the gods ends in trees. Marvel's rendering of the story, though, leaves out the part where Apollo and Pan are devastated and the river gods were actually being sneaky and vindictive. Daphne's father really wanted grandchildren and was punishing his daughter for wanting to remain a virgin. But once again, Marvel knows this. He is not using the stories to support his trees are better than people point because he thinks that is how it actually happened. He is twisting the stories around in an attempt to be witty. He is twisting the stories around in an attempt to be witty. We think Marvel's super witty, but that does not change the fact that this stanza gives readers, especially modern readers, some serious pause. Is there some resentment of women lurking under the surface here? And if there is, does that affect the way you look at the rest of the poem? The tone of this stanza is a little naughty, tongue in cheek, but also a little dark. Marvel is making a joke out of the two myths about rape. We'll take a break here and continue with the rest of the poem in the next session.